Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, we're a couple minutes starting up, but we're just making sure we have everything just right, including showing off a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. My name is Eric Burgess. I'm helping with project management and story development here, and I'm joined once again by Gunther Eckhart, who is our the principal designer of Stellaris, the man behind this amazing tool game that we're putting out right now. And we just want to give a quick update and talk a little bit about what we're planning to do for the course of this live stream. First off, we just want to give a quick discussion about the production. Production is going well. We have Uwe in the background here answering your questions as well, but he's been finishing the design of how everything's going to fit into the box. And we look forward to showing you some of these amazing trays and miniatures for people like me who are storage geeks. You're going to just love what we have to show here.
So. I can bring up a quick picture of one of the renderings.
Oh,
so
perfect.
This is the communal resource tray. Has all the resources that players need and share between each other in gameplay. So it has all like energy and research and stuff. And then here is a picture of it with the lid that we have designed on it. And important to note is that there's actually two communal resource trays. Instead of having one big one that had all the resources, we chose to have two. That way you can put them at opposite ends of the table so that they're within easy reach of all players.
Awesome. Yeah. And I've had a lot of fun geeking out on how beautiful these look. We're pretty excited about that. But we also wanted to make sure that we answer a lot of your questions today that you've asked for last time we did a live stream, which was very much, we had lots of questions about how a round of Stellaris Infinite Legacy actually looks today. So we want to really go through that sort of sequence of play so you see actual gameplay, how it's going to work out very well. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about event story writing that is continuing on and proceeding really, really well. And we're going to tell you just a little bit about our favorite stories again. We'll warn you ahead of time. So in case you're not, you want to avoid those spoilers, we'll warn you ahead of time if you want to sign off at that moment and not hear about that. But let's start out with what we're showing here. Gunther is showing us off this sort of sequence of play overview so that you can take a look at the kind of main board you're going to be looking at when you're playing a game with Stellaris.
Oh, sorry. What was that, Eric?
Sorry.
Question?
Yeah. Specifically, so players going to play rounds and essentially in the course of Stellaris, players are going to play rounds of play until one player kind of completes enough era objectives to trigger the end of an era, so the end of the game. Can we talk a little bit about kind of the number of objectives a player needs to complete kind of the current era?
Yeah, so a number of objectives, and these are communal objectives. Everybody is trying to complete the same set of objectives. So I put up one on the screen, and here's another one. I can put them side by side here. And players need to complete a number of objectives equal to the current era age of their empire. So if you are an Era 2 empire, you need to complete 2 of the objectives that are out there for that era to trigger the end of the era. If you're an Era 4 empire, so this is your 4th game with the empire, you have to complete 4. And so this is one of the many natural balancing features of the games that balances a older empire that has more capability to a younger empire that does not have as much capability. And you can also see that we have 2 different objectives here, one very research focused or resource management focused, and one very combat focused. But another interesting thing I can point out is that this one actually has an alternative objective for pacifist empires. Since pacifist empires would not have an objective to fight and eliminate things, they have an alternative on that card. So yeah.
Very, very cool. So if you kind of look back at the round here, we can see that it's kind of split into 4 parts. Can we talk a little bit about those kind of sections of the round?
Yeah, the 4 main sections of a round, that every round is your start of round effects, your events, your action phases, and then your refresh phase. And you'll do all of these steps in a round until the round ends when somebody completes their number of needed objectives.
Great. And what's the kind of the rationale for kind of breaking it up this way? I mean, obviously we can see the action phase is a lot of what you're doing, and it's highlighted here specifically, but kind of what's kind of gone into the decision to be able to break it up this way?
Well, I mean, first of all, we wanted to have play go as quick as possible, and also like have players make sense when they're doing things, or what they have to think about at different parts. That's the main thing. Is we wanted to carpet. It's a hard word for me to say. We wanted to split up what players had to think about during a turn, so you don't have to think about everything you're doing. You need to know for your empire all the time. Instead, you only have to think about part of your empire during these different steps and different phases. So it's really limiting about how much you have to juggle and remember at any one moment.
So there's like a big benefit for players using those kind of special effects at the start of the round instead of having to have these abilities kind of affect them at different points in the round. Can you tell us a little more about that, Gunther?
Yeah. So the special effects, you have a main thing you start out with special effects are your traits. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 traits here I can show. Here we have the rapid breeding trait. Let me see if I can zoom in on this. Where's the zoom button? Well, it looks like it's not going to let me. So the special trait here gives you an effect. And instead of having this rapid breeding affect you every time you grow your population, we chose to have it have an effect that affects you only at the start of the round. What this means is that you're not going to have to remember all of these exception rules while you're playing. Instead, there's a whole part of the turn that says, hey, look to see what special exception rules that your empire has. This is when they have them. So we are trying to minimize those things that happen a lot of big Euro games where you unlock a special ability and then you keep forgetting to use it the few times during your round or your turn that you can use it. And then later you're like, I'm really missing out on this benefit that I planned for previously. Yeah. So this is a great example where we specifically in the sequence of play have a step. Remember your special effects. This is the time they take effect. You don't have to constantly try to remember them. You can focus on the other gameplay elements and strategies of the game.
Yeah, I love it. Reducing the cognitive load is wonderful. I'm very interested, though, specifically in Fallen Empire actions and Spaceborne Alien actions. Like, what do those do at the start of round?
So, Fallen Empires and Spaceborne Aliens, they are both non-player factions that you can interact with. Spaceborne Aliens, they each have a different way they affect your system if they're in your system. For example, mining drones will destroy a mine you've built, or a space amoeba will decrease the stability in the system because they make it less safe for any civilian ships to move in that system. Then the Fallen Empires, they actually have their own AI deck, and you will draw every color for each player can have up to one AI empire in that color. So if you are the yellow player and the yellow Fallen Empire is in the game, you draw one of these Fallen Empire cards, and it will tell you what they do, but each of these actions has a condition. It first says, if this empire is at war, they will do this. If they are xenophile, they'll do this. If they're xenophobe, they'll do this. And if none of these are true, they will do their Fallen Empire basic action, which is listed on that Fallen Empire specific Fallen Empire card.
Nice.
So and they can do all sorts of things. But the important thing to know here is that it is dependent on what that Fallen Empire's ethics are. And so that is what the special effect of what Fallen Empires and how they behave. Now, you can also do things to Fallen Empires and dictate how you interact with them. But this is how Fallen Empires interact with you.
Love it. I love it. And I love how that brings back, previous plays of the game before. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, if we get back to that, do our thing here. So right after that, of course, is events. We've talked a lot about events lately, but because they add that narrative to the game and that RPG feel. As an old RPG player, I love that it gets the story elements. Really, that's the stuff you tell people about afterwards, and gives you an opportunity to be able to get players. They're guaranteed to have an event every round, but I see key events and empire events are listed here. Can you tell us about the different kinds of events and what's the difference between these things?
Yeah, so first I'll talk about empire events. This is the first event you will encounter in the game. And empire events are events that just kind of happen to your empire. They're not things that you trigger. They're just things that could potentially happen. This includes pirates, or in this case, on this card, a new disease that breaks out in your empire. And there's a narrative story about how you choose to deal with this event, in this case, a disease. So that's what the empire events. They're events that happen to your empire. Key events, on the other hand, are events that only trigger if you meet a specific kind of condition. So in this event, this is that your species has discovered a pre-sapient species that is a great candidate to be uplifted to sentience. So we have, when you research the ability to uplift species, you get a symbol on a card that slides into your empire screen and shows that symbol at the top of your empire screen once you research it. And so these key cards have a lock with a symbol that if that symbol is in your empire screen, you will trigger the event on the card. If it does not trigger this lock here and do the key event, then you look at the generic key on the card and see if another event you have in your screen has a lock with that same letter. So if we looked at the Empire card, it has an A lock and B lock. This key would not trigger either of these locks. And you would move on to the second key event because you draw 2 instead of 1. That is what key cards do. They trigger special events that are dictated about what your empire has done and your ethical choices of your empire. And they continue events that you already have going on in your empire.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry. So what's the rationale for drawing 2 key events like that?
The reason why we have you draw 2 key events, I'll bring up the action board here again. You first draw 2 key events because there is more than one way to get events. And so you'll be generating more than one event on average in a round. So we need you to be able to progress and resolve these events at a rate higher than 1 a round. So if you have 5 events in progress in your screen, 2 event key cards allow that. The keys on these cards can progress 2 separate stories per round and make sure that you kind of decrease your events once you get to a certain threshold. So it's a statistical design where you're always going to have a certain number of events. If you only have 2 events, you're probably not going to be triggering 2 of the locks on those events and continuing both stories.
All right.
But once you have 5 or 6, odds are that up to 2 of those locks at the top or bottoms of the cards, as depending on how they're oriented and placed in your screen, will be unlocked and continue the story.
And so all of these events are happening before the action phase. Why have those all happen before the action phase?
Well, the main reason why is because we want you to be able to have all your resources available when you start these events. All of your leaderships are fresh. You have all of your research and energy and all your other resources. And what the events are about, are you, based off how you choose, are you willing to spend the resources to progress that choice? If you do that, you might not have a leader available for the rest of the phase, but we want to have you make that choice at the start before you do your actions, so that you made choice. do I want to invest in this event or save those resources for the future? And so that is why we do that first, so that it affects your actions immediately during the action phases and not have your action phases affect your events. We want your events to affect your action phases.
Nice. Okay. Well, now we get into the meat of it, the action phase where, this is the part of the turn players are obviously going to do most of their actions for their empire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love to go through these things, but right up there at the top, it says action phase is 4x. Are we doing this 4 times, or is that just a reference to the fact that this is a 4x game?
You are doing this action phase 4 times in a row. So this step 3 gets repeated 4 times. That's because, again, it's about separating what you have to think about into different parts. So instead of having all of the actions that you have available to you to do in only one step here or one phase, we split up the actions that every player is going to want to do every round between 4 different phases that we have laid out on the phase boards. And you will get to do each phase board once every round in the order that you choose. So you can do the first phase board first, or maybe you choose to do the second phase board first. And each player gets to choose the order they do their phases independently from other players.
Okay,
so
go
ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
One player might be doing the exploit phase, while another player will choose to do the exopolitics phase.
Right. Okay. So then, that's what we need to see is what are the different phase boards?
The 3 phase boards, and we'll be going through the phase boards in detail in the next live stream.
Okay.
So the 4 phases are the explore, expand, exploit, and exopolitics. And again, there's a lot to talk about on just the phase boards alone. So we're going to set up a separate live stream just to talk about those. Right now, we'll just focus on what is a sequence, how does a round play out through this sequence of play here.
Okay, that sounds good. So next is draw cards. How many cards we getting? How does that work without a turn?
Okay, so the number of cards, and I want to point out here that this is your action board right here. And on this action board, it gives a lot of these keys and clues about what you get to do. And so you always have in front of you this round summary, and to the right of this board is where you would place your phase boards. And at the very top, it has drawn cards shown here. And it says that you draw a number of cards equal to your era. This is the era symbol right here. So if I'm an era 2 empire, I draw 2 cards each phase. And what is really nice, starting out, you only have 3 action cards in your action deck as determined by what 3 ethics you choose for your empire. So you only have 3 cards starting out, but you're going to constantly be adding more cards to your action deck through technologies you research, and different event choices you make can add cards to your action deck. And so as you go era to era, your action deck is getting bigger, but also the number of cards that you get to naturally draw grows. So it's a nice progression. By era 3, you probably have anywhere from 10 to 20 action cards in your action deck, but the number of action cards that you draw in a turn grows too as your action deck grows. But even if you have more action cards than you're able to draw in turn, so if I'm era 3, I get to do that 4 times. That means I'm going to get to draw 12 of my action cards. But you can always choose to draw more action cards by spending administration here.
Okay.
So, but administration is used for a lot of different things. So that's where sometimes a tough choice comes in. And then in terms of playing cards, you get to play 1 action card per round or per phase at no additional cost other than what's listed on the action card. But you can play more cards by spending that precious administration. Administration really helps you be efficient and do more with your empire. And action card play is a perfect example of how that happens.
Awesome. But players are drawing cards after they choose their phase board. that right?
Yeah, and we did that because we play tested it both ways, where you first draw your hand of action cards and then determine what phase you play.
Mhm.
And then in this case, how we have it shown here, you choose your phase first, then draw your cards. We chose to do it that way because honestly, it just sped up play and did not decrease player enjoyment.
Mhm.
Because if you are choosing your action cards first, you're drawing your action cards first. Players were trying to figure out what phase they wanted to play based off the phases and what action cards they had in their hand. And that extra comparison thinking, while felt strategic, just gave more things for players to consider. They thought longer and ended up making the game play longer. When we switched it, play testers didn't mind. They didn't really notice any less feel of strategy because really, honestly, what cards they had in their hand usually didn't really affect what phase board they chose in most cases. So putting it this way just made it less of a slog for players to decide which of the 4 phase boards they wanted to plan.
Okay, yeah. Sometimes too much information can be a thing.
Yes, and that's one thing we focus so much in this game is how do we I can't say that word still.
Compartmentalize.
Thank you. I get sometimes that's a problem with being taught German first, then English. It's I need the long, really long German words to be able to say them.
That's right.
Yeah, so it's separating those what you have to consider and how the order you do that has been a thought throughout the design of this.
So that actually brings me to the maybe another thing where compartmentalizing is a thing. So next is plan phase, and then we have some more stuff we do, and then resolve phase are separated like that. What's the rationale there?
Yeah, so the plan phase is step C here, and resolve is F.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what's in the middle in a second, but they're separated. We don't just have players do their turns. If you could choose your phase board and just take the actions and do the turn. However, that means only one player at a time can do their phase board at a time. So what we instead do, we added this really cool simultaneous play feature where players plan what they do on their phase boards all at the same time. Again, we'll go in this in detail when we go through phase boards in the next live stream.
Okay.
But having players all do the planning at the same time means that players are spending all the slow time of thinking, trying to consider what they want to do. Players are all doing that at the same time, which sped up the game because instead of people doing it sequentially, if you're a 4-player game, 4 separate times, players were also having less downtime where you're not sitting there doing nothing. You're all doing the slowest part of any board game, which is the thinking at the same time. And then the resolve is sequentially, but there's no choices there. You've already made the choices just saying, hey, I'm going to reveal what I planned, and I'm just going to change the board state to match what I planned. And that goes very quick. But it was important to have players that go sequentially so players can see what the other players planned and how the board state's changing. We didn't want people all changing the board at the same time because players then only paid attention to their empire and did not stay aware to the game as a whole.
Nice. I like that. Well, I have to ask though, determine initiative is right smack dab in the middle of this whole action phase, and we've had questions about how that affects gameplay. Can you tell us a little bit about what initiative is doing for a player?
Well, initiative really, it does not affect gameplay that much. What initiative there for is that there's a lot of things where a player will have to make a choice or do something in the game. And to just create a universally easy to remember rule, we just said it's whoever has initiative. And you gain initiative by when you're planning. If you're the first person to say, I'm done planning, you announce that and you take the initiative player marker and you are then the initiative player.
Nice.
Because of the way the planning and resolution works, it has no effect on the actual player actions. It really is just in those weird cases that we can't predict, because we can't predict every time there might be a conflict of interest in a game this big and intricate. We just create this universal rule that if there's ever somebody that has to make the choice between A or B because they are both in conflict, the initiative player is who decides that.
Nice.
It's also used in events sometimes. So, for example, it'll say, connect a new system to the map. And we specifically say the initiative player connects it to the map. So it'll be something that somebody has to decide where this gets connected. We could make a complex randomization table where you roll or draw a card or something like that. But we decided just the randomization of who's the initiative player at the time was the most easy to play randomization rule we could think of.
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, it just simplifies, and there's just fewer rules to have to worry about.
And the important thing that it does not give a player an advantage.
Right.
That is what a lot of people assume, because usually you think, oh, I have initiative, that means I have an advantage. It does not give an advantage to a player over another player through gameplay.
No, that's nice. That's nice. I will say I am worried about crisis actions. That doesn't sound like a positive thing. Next is crisis action. What are we talking about here?
Well, the crises are kind of like Fallen Empires, where they're a non-player faction that players will sometimes interact with. But the thing that's important, though, is that crises are not always in the game. A crisis only happens every 4th era. So every 4th era players play will be what we call crisis era, which is a completely different feeling era, because you're playing a normal era, but you have the addition of a crisis that is causing the potential destruction of all life in the galaxy. And that's something that, again, we'll also talk about in a future live stream. I don't want to talk too much about specifics because I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but in the Kickstarter, we did have as special rewards and also as add-ons the Crisis boss minis. And these minis come to play during the crisis. And the players have to kind of decide of how much are we going to come together and how much are we going to put our differences aside to defend and defeat this crisis. Because players are not going to be able to do it alone. So that they're going to need to be able to work together. And it creates this kind of interesting cooperative part in a largely overall competitive game. But the crises work a lot like those Fallen Empire cards here, where the crises have a list of actions that they attempt to do if certain conditions are met. And but unlike the Fallen Empires only do one action every round, while Crisis does an action every phase.
Yeah.
And that makes them just they're a real threat. They can very well take out a player, if not the entire galaxy. But that's reminds me of another cool thing about how we structure the game, is that when you lose the game in different ways, we actually unlock new content for you. So losing a crisis is, yeah, sure, you lost, but also it adds new stuff for you to play around with and experience in your next games. So we both give rewards for winning the game, but also expanded gameplay, things that trigger when you lose the game in different ways.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we already talked about resolving the phase, but playing political cards, what are political cards going to do for players?
So political cards are those things. This is another great way where we separated what players have to keep track of. We got rid of all of those weird conditionals that in the Stellaris video game, the computer takes track of. For example, in Stellaris, if your approval's too low or your stability or you have too many unemployed workers for too long, you'll start to generate crime. And we have no special rules about those conditions, that if you have this many unemployed workers or your stability is this low in a system, you get criminals. Instead, things like this are triggered off of political cards. So political cards are, let me see if I can bring up one of those quickly to show. We did detail these in an update last year. Because like all these game components, we went through so many different iterations of the layout and the art, where we first had just our black and white art, where it's just white with words on it and a few symbols.
Right.
Then our prototype, just to make it look a little bit better, where we usually actually take art from some of our other games just to make the play testing a little bit easier. And then in the case of, then we do the final layout where we get the final art. We figure out exactly how the wording is going to be structured, and we do it that way. But the political cards have all of the special effects that can get triggered on them. And players will, and here I'm just bringing up one of these, our set political cards here. We have these political cards are double-sided. So let me find one with crime real quick. So since we're talking about crime, so here's a good example is that we have the planetary decision in the video game, launch anti-crime campaign, is on our political cards. So you have a chance of drawing this every round. You're going to get to draw, you'll draw at least one political card around, and you can play up to one per phase during this part of the phase. But here it says you can move a criminal to unemployed if you have a troop transport in the system. It costs some influence, but we took that planetary decision and put it on the political cards. So the more political cards that you're able to draw, if you tailor your empire during a political route, you'll be more likely to have these political events available to you when you need them. And these cards are also tradable between empires, and you can just play them on other players' empires. So this is a great way for players to form alliances and negotiate, and the benefits of having friends that you can negotiate to have them play political cards on your empire and not just have yourself do it. The other thing is that there's negative ones, and you notice these are double-sided, and this is kind of hard to read, but this is a illegal mining, but this is there's also one about crime, or here's in a neutral system, pirates get added on this one. This is how all those weird, just kind of game triggering negative effects happen, but they're player run. We're using other players as a computer to keep track of if a player meets a certain condition. If they have 3 unemployed workers on an empire, I have this card that lets me move one of those workers to criminal. And so that's what the political cards are doing, is they are letting us have all those weird special gameplay occurrences that are normally taken care of by the computer in the video game. And we're giving them piecemeal to the players, giving them the chance to trigger if a player happens to meet that condition and a player happens to have that card in their hand. And what's kind of cool about that is it's analogous to how it works in the video game, is that when you have so much unemployed people in a system where a system stability is so low, it's not guaranteed that a worker is going to move to criminal. There's a percentile chance that that's going to happen every day of the cycle of the game. So that's how we're using the statistics of a board game to give the same feel of the video game. If you have unemployed workers, you're like, oh, those could become criminal. It's not guaranteed, but that's something I'm going to have to worry about if I don't take care of this. Eventually it will happen. Eventually somebody will draw that card that lets them do that.
So how do those political cards balance with like players that are in different eras, like somebody a little further along with their empire than somebody that's just started out again in later on?
Yeah, great question. Let me bring up another card here. So there's 2 ways that this is done. And let me see if I can do this real quick. I'm going to select all of these layers here. I'm just going to kind of flip it around for us. Did that work? Oh, no, because I didn't have it centered. There we go. Now we can see this upright.
Yay.
This unhappy worker card. If your approval is 4 or less, the player must spend 1 civilian ship or 2 food, energy, or minerals of your choice. So basically, they have unhappy workers. That means their production rates are going down. But this costs 1 influence of play on somebody else. However, if they are a lower era than you are, it costs 3 influence instead of 1. So to play this card on a younger empire than you costs more resources. It makes it harder and less likely you're going to play it, because otherwise you might be able to play 3 of these political cards throughout a round. But if you play it on a younger empire, this might be the only political card you get to play this whole round. On the reverse, if an empire plays a political card on an empire that's a higher era, let me change this to preview so it's a little easier to see. We have this symbol that says, if they are higher era than you, it has this bonus additional effect. So they must spend, they have to spend things of your choice, not of their choice, but of your choice. So you can basically do the more damage to them. And the effects are scale. As you get older, it's more likely that the effects increase in severity. But it's another great example about how things are balanced. Things are more expensive to play against younger empires, and the effects you play are more potent against older empires, which means older empires have to be a little bit careful sometimes about how they treat the younger empires.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Awesome. Let's get back to the board here. And so we're through the action phase, because I know we're going to talk about battle cards and battle. That's a whole additional.
Yeah, we're going to go through ship design again. We have a planned sequence of live streams for you over the next couple months, and the battle phases and how ship design works is going to be a highlight that we look forward to.
Yeah. So let's talk about that later. But maybe we can get into refreshing resources. So I know that's everybody. The players are going to get back everything they've spent during the round, like reshuffle their discard piles and hand back their decks. But let's talk about what these individual things are. So what are storage markers?
Okay, storage markers are basically they represent capacity to save resources round to round. So if you have resources left over in your tray during the place storage marker portion, you're going to place that storage marker in that well of your tray. So they basically act like a temporary version of that, but you get to move that storage marker to wherever you have resources still, round to round. Starting out, players have 0 storage markers, so they have no way to save up resources they don't spend. But there are many ways players can gain these through the game, either through technology. Materialist empires actually start with them, so it's a great example of gameplay capability that expands as you play.
Nice. And so then we get to refresh resources. Do you get everything back?
You get all of your resources back, because resources don't represent stockpile. They represent income rate. So when you spend a resource in a round, you're not spending a stockpile that resource. You are spending some of the resources that you are able to produce that round. However, storage markers are some are not. They are a stockpile. You only get those back if you have a resource unspent in your tray. There's also temporary versions of resources. These are little octagonal tokens. Normal resources are round.
Right.
Temporaries are octagons just to make them stand out. And if you spend those, they go back to the game supply. And those are given through a lot of, sometimes you'll get them as a reward from an event or a special effect. They'll say you get extra food for every planet that you have population on. Those are how those temporary resources do not go back. But you get your leaders back, you get any civilian ships you spend back, you get all your resources, and you also get any cards that you played get shuffled back into your action deck, which of course is the last step, D there.
Well, that's after this warning about deficit tokens. So it's going to cost you 4 resources. How do you get deficit tokens, and how can I avoid that?
Well, deficit tokens, I mean, sometimes you can avoid them. I've definitely chosen to get deficit tokens to meet a certain goal. Objectives are a great example of this, where we had I believe one of the objectives was to spend 10 resources at once
Mm-hmm.
See if I can bring that back up. Yeah, this card right here. Spend 10 of single type. Especially early on, that can be really hard to get that much of one resource. And
Oh yeah.
the last game I played, I really had to focus that, and I actually chose to let myself go into deficit to build up one type of resource enough to get this objective. But you get those objectives as you build different things in the game, most things in the game have upkeep, meaning you remove them from your tray and they leave your tray as long as that piece is in the game for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where your resource tray is always in an ebb and flow. You're gaining resources, but you're also losing resources as upkeep. So when you build a battleship, it has a one upkeep of an alloy.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody might declare war on me, and I need to build up my fleet fast and have a bunch of alloy upkeep that actually sends me in a deficit, but I really need those ships to fight the war.
Oh yeah.
And that is a good example. But also, they sometimes happen through events, where event will have you have to get rid of some resources because of your choices. And you might choose to make a choice, even though it puts you in deficit for the potential gain you hope to get from that choice.
Right. No, that's great. That's great.
Yeah. And as you see here, deficit tokens make you spend resources. If you do not have a certain resource, if you're in the negative production of a resource,
Mm-hmm.
you have to spend other resources, in this case, 4 other resources to make up for that deficit. That represents that you're making up for it, and also some of the supply chain disruptions that a deficit can cause in other parts of your empire.
No, I love that it gives people the option to play how they're going to. Fiscal conservative like me, going to be very careful about those deficit tokens, I'm sure. But who knows? They'll happen. It'll happen sometimes. All right. So then lastly, shuffling action and tech decks. Maybe just what are the decks you've got in your Empire box there, just to clarify that for people in case they wonder like why there's 2 types.
Yeah, so you have your action deck, which are the action cards that you're drawing every phase, and those give you the special weird actions that let you break the normal phase rules.
Mm-hmm.
That is kept in your action deck.
Mm-hmm.
And then your tech cards. Those are the current technologies that you could potentially research.
Mm-hmm.
Every explore phase, you're going to get to draw tech cards from your tech deck and choose if you want to research them or not. And those are your 2 main decks. Your third deck is your Empire deck. And this starts out with a very large deck of around 130 cards. These are all your research cards that are not available to you to research at the start of the game, and also other game effect special cards that you don't have access to.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all numbered from 1 to 130.
Mm-hmm.
And certain cards, researching a card will have you find that card in that Empire deck and add it to your tech deck so that you now have it available for you to potentially research. But there's all sorts of other special cards and effects that will get unlocked from you, and you draw from that Empire deck, right, to add new gameplay elements to the game. And the last deck I want to mention is your Legacy deck. And this is a really cool deck that actually does not affect you at all. Mm-hmm. Your choices in events and your choices in gameplay will sometimes have you draw specific cards from the game box. We have your Empire deck, but mm-hmm. there's also the game deck, which is also a numbered deck that's shared among all players. And sometimes you'll have to draw a specific card from that and gets added to your Legacy deck. And nice. What happens with your Legacy deck, when you are done playing an Empire, either because you abandon them, they're wiped out, or you successfully ascend them and they leave the game in victory, all the cards in your Legacy card deck get placed into the various parts of the game, and they represent your Empire's legacy after they're gone. Nice. So that's one way when you play an Empire, you're going to be making permanent changes to the game based off your choices. And those are the cards that are added to your Legacy deck that are only added to the game once your Empire is no longer in the game.
I love it. I love it. I love the way that just evolves and gives more variety and more opportunity to be able to play interesting stuff throughout as you play through the campaign of the game. So that's really cool. Well, so thanks for going through that, Gunta,
Yeah,
because
no problem.
we have lots of questions very specific about people wanting to understand gameplay and what a turn is like. So, and we
And I know people have a lot of other questions to bring in the comments.
yeah,
We don't have time to answer everybody's questions during each live stream, so we'll definitely be addressing some of people's common questions during this live stream in the next update.
yeah, absolutely. So, I know we wanted to talk a little bit about favorite events, but we're running pretty long on time here. Do you want to mention something? We should put up the spoiler alert, of course,
Yeah.
and warn anybody if you don't want to hear ahead of time about some of the really cool stories that are being developed now that are going to be appearing in the Stellaris game and expansions. Here's your last warning.
Mm-hmm.
Drop off now, because we're going to talk just very briefly about a couple of ones that we like and that we'd love to share with people. So, okay, 1, 2, 3. That's it. If you're still here, you're expecting to hear some spoilers. So, good to. What's your favorite new event as we're closing up the event process here and getting to some really interesting ideas?
Yeah, that's really hard because there's so many I like. I mean, I love a good brain slug, but I have to say my favorite.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say my favorite right now is our steampunk empire.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an event where this is just kind of a curiosity event, where you discover a gas giant moon system, where you find the remnants of a kind of spacefaring empire. They're a multi-moon civilization that traveled between the moons of this gas giant using ships that were powered by steam power. And I love this. I think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it just is really kind of fun idea that they're just like using steam while we're using all these fusion engines, and they're just using things that we've been using since the 19th century.
Yeah.
And but some of the ramifications for that is mainly that you can start collecting different steam powered artifacts.
Nice.
And it's just one of those little funny curiosity, colorful events. It's not like a big, scary or super mysterious event, but like, that's interesting. And I love those kind of events when I play the video game as well.
I was going to say, it plays into what the experience of Stellaris is, where there's lots of homage to things that we all love about science fiction, the history of science fiction come up. And, of course, steampunk is a huge thing. So I love the way that it's a hat tip to that concept and that category, that sort of genre, if you will. So, yeah,
so Eric, what's your favorite event that you have written in the last month?
I have to say my favorite is this concept we have now of sort of a sentient cryptocurrency, where I call it genetic coins, and the idea being that essentially individual people based on their genetics are sort of their own little NFT, and the opportunity to be able to like it comes in as a way to be able to potentially deal with financial issues, but we see multiple events coming out of this now, where there's an opportunity to be able to go, how dangerous is this for people that want to come collect, want to, bank more of this, and banking more of these means maybe containing people, which is, I think, an interesting concept to build out. And, like so much, I think science fiction or speculative fiction, if you like to call it that, it has some commentary also about the modern world and what we think about it. So I love that concept a lot. As we were talking about, the different types of events that happen. This is sort of a financial or economic event that happens in your empire, and I think we've just done some really interesting ways for that to build out the story.
Am I right that is actually an event that a player adds to the game?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, and based on how you react to that event, it comes up as a new event that comes into the game. So that gives more variety for the game as we go. So
that's really cool. I mean, I love the idea of it. I mean, we talk a lot. I mean, AI is really big in the social discussion right now, and same with cryptocurrency and blockchains. So the idea of a artificial intelligence blockchain is kind of funny. So does that mean is that like blockchain made up of is it like a hive mind of multiple individuals make up a blockchain?
Yeah, it's a neat idea. I love
I
it.
mean,
I love it so
I don't
much.
know. It sounds a little horrific to me.
You know, it's hard. It's hard. I'm a technophile, so I love it. I love all the all the new things that are happening
You
in
know that
technology.
I'll remember that's what you want done with you once you pass is that you want to be turned into a blockchain. I
I'm
think it's a
actually
new one.
I'm definitely one of these people that's very happy to be uploaded to a system when you know the meat goes stale. I'm happy to do it. So yeah, not for everyone. All right, well, good to yes, we've gotten a ton of questions, but we do want to be respectful of you know of the time that we've got here planned for today. So we definitely are capturing all of your questions in here. We'll get to those on future live casts or potentially in updates that, you know, obviously we mentioned a couple of these things we think are going to be best shown in an update. And yeah, share your feedback. We'd love to be able to hear what else you'd like to see for future events. But otherwise, thanks so much for telling us so much
Yeah,
about Stellaris today. We're very excited to be able to keep on working and you know, get
I'm
these.
excited to stop working on it.
Yeah.
I'm excited to just be able to play it. It's and not have to be like, okay, we have to finish writing this. So I'm excited just to get the final copy to my table.
Yes,
So
absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's in the works, and it's a constant part of our days, and it's really getting to an exciting moment here. So we'll wish everybody a great weekend,
yeah,
and
and thank you guys for watching, your support.
yeah, thank you so much for being part of the live stream, and we'll announce when the next one's coming up soon, so we can cover some of these additional subjects we talked about today.
Mhm.
So thanks everybody for your support.